Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agile Couple Podcast. I'm Leanne McManus.
And I am Kevin McManus. And today we're going to be talking about feedback and some of the minefields and some of the benefits of feedback. So let's start with the reasons why people are asking for feedback. Is that a good place?
Sure.
Okay. So oftentimes I think, when things are usually going awry at organizations is when you get requests for feedback.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think as leaders, they've got a preconceived notion of what they want to hear in the feedback. And that kind of puts a bias in place such that when they do get the feedback, if it's not in alignment with what they were anticipating, then all of a sudden you get into a bit of a credibility issue because you're asking people to be honest, provide constructive feedback. But once again, as a leader, you need to have the intellectual humility to be able to take that feedback and, make it constructive and not bias it with your own opinion. And I think the reason that that's important is that's one of the minefields that oftentimes is laid is the fact that if you don't act on it, or if you ignore the feedback that was given, then it puts you in a bit of a credibility issue with your team, the organization. Okay. So Leanne, how would you handle that situation if you were a leader and you got feedback that was counter to what you were anticipating? How would you handle that?
I think that happens a lot. So leaders think two parts to that come to mind for me. As a leader, you're tactically trying to get through the things, all the things you got to get done, right? And so one of the things is like, oh, that didn't go well, or it seems like I'm hearing that things didn't go well with something. So we need to get feedback on that. And it's more of like a tactical thing. So you tell somebody, I want feedback, or you tell your whole team, I want feedback on this, but there's no context around it. So you're just checking something off on your list. And then you get pummeled with all this stuff from the food suck to stuff that really had nothing to do with what you wanted feedback on, or it's too true that you weren't prepared for that. Your leadership sucks, or, whatever it is. Right. So whatever.
But I don't think oftentimes when it's, especially if it's, I think this is an important thing. And we've seen situations where whoever is asking for the feedback, if that feedback's going directly to them,
yes,
immediately you're
not going to get real feedback.
You're not going to get real feedback. Right. Nobody is going to tell their manager, hey, you suck. I think you do a better job. So that's where you have to be conscious of, okay, how are we going to not only get the feedback, but who's going to be reviewing the feedback and preparing it in a way that you can actually get some value out of it?
Well, I think I recently learned from a colleague that you need to package it different. And tying it back to something that's not tied to emotion or to pointing fingers at something, even though there are things sometimes that need to get pointed out about people, packaging it different to say, what ultimately are the expectations of this thing, and how would you change that to meet those objectives?
Right.
Versus tell me everything that didn't work right with this.
Well, and I think it's also, I know the scenario you're talking about, and it's really how do we improve the process?
Yes.
And put the focus there, and then kind of tease out, if there's an individual or a group in particular that's inhibiting the ability for those expectations to be met, you're packaging that conversation in a way that it removes kind of that targeting or that threat that somebody may feel that, oh, I'm personally being attacked, where it's like, no, we're focusing on how do we improve the process. And as somebody who's participating in this, you need to be aware, of how to improve it.
Because a lot of times when you're asking for feedback, it's multifaceted. It is about the process, but it's probably also about the people involved who are running it or delivering on it or whatever it is. So it takes the plan. That's what I mean. So if you're tactically doing this, you're just like, say, go get feedback. There's no context around it. It takes time to plan. What are we really trying to get back? Are we really open to hearing anything? What do we want feedback on specifically? And you need to lay that out there. And then you need to be prepared, but you're also generally in almost any culture are dealing with historical debt. Somebody's already been burned by giving feedback.
Yeah.
So you're either going to get the people that are irritated to the nth degree and pissed off, and they're going to give you their true story because they don't care at this point. Or you're most likely going to get people who are, everything's great. That was the best thing I've ever been through. Or just middle of the road, 3 or whatever it is. That's not really how they feel. And as soon as you're done and they go off and they talk with other people, they're sharing what really their experience was or whatever. So it's not an easy thing. And I don't even maybe we need to reterm it and don't call it feedback. Don't call it surveys. Say, we're trying to improve the process. Here, we're trying to align to the objectives and the expectations. And so we're looking for feedback or some word. I don't know what the other word.
How do we continue to improve?
Yeah, we're looking to refine this to make sure that we're optimally delivering whatever this is. You need to probably put some thought into it. But there's too many people. It's like every place and every company and every client that I've worked with, this is always a problem. This is a human thing. Even we're on a committee for sports team, and it's the same thing. Like how you get feedback and how people deliver it.
Right.
Because they're either wanting to blow their top over something and it's not going to come out in a good way. Mm-hmm. So you do have to collect it, but you have to put thought into it.
Yeah. Well, I think not only the collection part, but I think you hit on a good point, which is at the beginning, you need to be able to plan for, what is the context and what specifically are you trying to get out of that, the feedback in order to improve the situation. Because, 99% of the time, the reason that you're asking for that feedback is there's something that's not, hitting on all cylinders and you need to make an adjustment. And you need to be able to have people provide honest feedback. Otherwise,
it's pointless. What's the point of doing it?
Yeah, it's like I've told teams in the past, it's like, if I don't know there's a problem, I can't help fix it, right?
Yes,
and part of it is that. But
sorry to interrupt you, but that whole thing, I think, is part of what we've talked about in other episodes that we've had. You have to build that culture in. And it takes time and it takes trust and it takes you saying, everything we're doing, we're going to iterate on it and we're going to have this process.
Yeah.
And so we're always going to try to align for whatever the objectives are that we're trying to hit. How do we keep getting closer and inching closer to that?
Well, and part of that too is because you're right. You have to be able to build that trust. And the best way to do that is it's not going to be a big bang approach where all of a sudden, 3 years down the road, everybody trusts everybody.
Yeah. Or I asked them, we did the survey and we asked them, they didn't tell us, right? One big bang thing. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, because it's that same thing. You need to be able to establish those feedback loops and be able to get information in, act on it so that people see that there's a tangible change, right? And then that's what's going to garner that trust over time. And that's something that is ongoing. You're never going to hit kind of a nirvana where it's like, okay, now everybody trusts everybody.
Right.
Because organizations change, people's lives change. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you have to be continually, kind of monitoring and tweaking that to make sure that as you're getting that information in, that there's tangible things that the people you're asking for the feedback, they're actually seeing, oh yeah, I gave this recommendation and it may not have been implemented, but there was also feedback the other way on maybe why that feedback, didn't hit. And it could be a timing thing. It's like, you can't make all of the changes that need to be done in one fell swoop. And I think that's where you have to be able to exercise that humility and patience. But at the end of the day, you also have to be focusing on establishing and maintaining that trust across the whole team.
Well, and also, so remember I said it's multifaceted a lot of times. So if you've got somebody who you're trying to get feedback on, like we're facilitators, trainers, right? Instructors. We get evaluated on anything we've ever done. As an employee, anybody who works in a company, you get evaluated. Hopefully you're getting those quite regularly, not once a year, but everybody generally has this type of evaluation. So if you're looking for feedback on something like that, you have to separate it and have intent behind each part, right? But you also have, so if you're asking for feedback on a person, some function around how did this trainer do? Like how was the content? How was the location? How was the trainer? How was all these things? That is a personal thing. That's now somebody who's in charge of the food and the location, that's personal to them because that's their job. But you're really rating a person. It's differently than material and, content and stuff. The questions need to be phrased different. But also it helps you align to help them improve. So, there has to be strategy behind it and you have to plan is what I'm saying. So you can't just flippantly put stuff out there. Because the other thing that happens is that a lot of people fudge the responses then. The people receiving the information, there's also some of that. So how transparent are you in the actual feedback? Because that gets, oh, we've got a bunch of extremes out here and we don't want to show. Not necessarily the extremes aren't accurate. They might be the truthful ones. So that it takes, you have to do it multiple times to really know, like, is this legitimate or is this off, right? But I think when you're assessing a person and whatever it is for like if you're an employee or whatever, one person doing it is not going to give you a true picture, right? Which is why we do 360s. So I just say that you have to package that, the questions and the how the delivery is done and how you align somebody to improvement against that. Also, I know that there are certain people, and we've even found this with different cultures, some people are just harsher, just naturally harsher than others. Some cultures are harsher than others, right? In what they'll say.
And some are more lenient.
And some are like lenient and they'll never give you the truth. It does not matter. We could have this whole conversation with them. They'll shake their heads and they'll go back and everything's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to know that though. You can't know that. That's the doing it regularly. You'll start to see, and you could see the pattern. So we did it in this area and this area and this area in the world. Consistently, this area always does that. So maybe we need to ask the questions different there. Or maybe it's not asking the questions. Maybe there's a different way of having one-on-one communications to get feedback, right? You might have to change the delivery style to find out, to get the feedback that you need. Yeah. So there's not really like an answer to all of this, but it's a regular thing that everybody's running into. Everybody has to get feedback on stuff. So if you're finding what you're working on is not giving you feel like you're not getting honest answers, or you don't like the answers, those are two different problems that you probably need to dig into, right? What would you say for that, just to kind of end this?
Yeah, I think anytime that you're in that position, I think that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast as well, is we've got decades of experience in dealing not just with the business side of things, but also that human component, with the intent of being able to help everybody achieve, the best outcome for what they're doing in their career and their advancement and everything else. So I know this is an area that both Leanne and I get excited about, because we're very much focused on that human component that oftentimes is overlooked. And when it comes down to providing feedback, whether for an individual or a team or an organization, there's some best practices. There's some, kind of guardrails that you can put in place to be able to get the most effective communication flowing both ways. Because once again, it's not just a one-way street. That communication is always having to go back. And oftentimes I think that's where those loops are not truly loops. They're one ways.
Well, actually, so I know we're bringing this to an end, but one of the things I would say be very weary of is if you're saying, I'm going to send, let's say, a survey out for something, the person sending it out is the person being evaluated, you're not going to get reliable information back. It's kind of pointless. And you lose credibility generally from everybody, because then they're like, this is awkward.
Yeah.
Right. And one more thing is, like, if you do get, maybe you're not doing a feedback thing with like a survey or something like that, but you're actually, we live in the agile world. So everything we do, we try to do some form of a retrospective, or at least debrief on. But a retrospective should be focused around the general, the who's there and what we're doing. And if somebody gives feedback on that, and you're in charge of like, okay, the next day we're going to do this, and you don't, that is the point of that, is to try and refine directly for, right. So let's say you're in a 5-day thing. Let's say I'm leading a 5-day class and I have the group do a retrospective. Here's what we loved today. Let's keep doing that. We did not like this, or we were missing this, or stop doing that altogether, or whatever. If I ignore that feedback and then the next day I come in and I haven't changed any of that, and right. I have them do another retrospective at the end of the day, how does that make you feel, right? You're like, what are you going to get out of it? What's the point? I just dismissed whoever made those comments, and the general thing has no meaning.
Yeah. So any subsequent requests, you're diminishing the value of it, because people are like, why am I going to give it to you?
Tuning out the whole rest of the session probably because of that. So so you probably need to look at your own delivery and like what you're doing, plan ahead of time, know what the outcomes are, give the context around what you're looking for. How are you aligning goals or the outcomes to what you're trying to build and what you're trying to improve? And I would be totally transparent about that. keeping this in mind, we're going to, we want to get some sort of information back from those of you that are part of this, whatever it is, right? And here's what we're trying to hit. So we're just trying to make sure that we're coming closer and closer to meeting that objective.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. And if you got any other thoughts or comments, I think you can comment on our YouTube page. It's probably the easiest place. And let us know if you'd like us to discover or talk about anything else and more, I guess, more on feedback or really anywhere else in the working world.
Yep.
I would say. All right.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
Thanks all.